What's up, guys? We're back at it again. It's the second Barely Explained, and we're back with Professor Fielding for our second coronavirus interview. So just giving you some background, Professor Burtram Fielding is the Director of Research Development at UWC, and he's also the Principal Investigator of the Molecular Biology and Virology Research Lab, also at UWC.
Serious stuff.
Yeah.
Serious stuff.
And he's been studying coronaviruses since 2003. So bottom line, he knows what he's talking about. I won't have him introduce himself again, but thank you for being back.
Yeah, thanks for making the time.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. He's also my dad, so he's been quarantined with me. So, if he wants me to stay happy, he needs to do this.
Yeah.
So that's great.
So we're not quarantined together, we're just in lockdown because the government has called a lockdown.
Yeah, sorry, lockdown.
So we're not infected.
We're not infected.
This
it's
isn't
lockdown.
a quarantine.
No, sorry. Anyway, so thanks for coming again, and just giving some context because the situation's changed a fair amount since the first time we spoke. Like, we're seeing the exponential nature of viral outbreaks. As of the latest WHO situation report that we had, there was 372,757 confirmed cases worldwide and 16,631 deaths. As of the NICD stats for today, there's 709 confirmed cases in South Africa, but 0 deaths. As a result of this, the government's decided to put us into lockdown, effective from 23:59 on Thursday evening, the 26th of March 2020, and then this will last till the 16th of April 2020.
Can I just add to that stat
Yeah.
of South Africans? We are now 709 cases countrywide, with the highest number of cases in the world without any deaths.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll dive into that in a moment because
Even
that's
though we have 2 critical at the moment.
too
apparently.
critical, yes.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So just jumping right into it, what is the government trying to achieve with this lockdown?
So remember, any infectious disease would have a cycle that it has to go through. And with COVID-19, for instance, we mentioned the last time that it has an RO number, an R0 number of 2.
Okay, an RO number being?
It's essentially a reproduction number.
Yeah.
And it is, when somebody is infected, how many others can they infect? So you look at different studies, the RO number is between about 2, 2.5, 3,
It's exponential.
which means one person infects 2, which becomes 4, which becomes 16.
Yeah.
So it goes through all types of outbreaks would go through the same, depending on the RO numbers.
Yeah.
We mentioned the last time that measles, for instance, has an RO number of between 13 and 16,
Yeah.
which makes it obviously the curve much bigger.
Yeah.
So government really, by calling a lockdown, it is really they call it flattening the curve.
Yes.
Okay.
And it is really to spread out the number of infections over a longer time. Because remember, imagine in South Africa we have 1 million people needing medical assistance. Would our medical facilities be able to cope with it? No.
Yeah.
So the idea with this lockdown is really to flatten out the curve. So you have infections, but spread over a longer time.
Prevention instead of cure in this
So
case.
which allows if anybody needs critical care, ventilation, etc., our medical services would be able and able to.
Yeah.
And that's really the thought behind this.
Okay.
So you were saying over a long amount of time. So is the hope that the same amount of people doesn't get sick at the same time, or are we trying to minimize infections?
So essentially, according to calculations, remember, I'm not an epidemiologist. Epidemiologists are people who really study outbreaks and how it behaves. So epidemiologists all over the world, including those working for the WHO, has made calculations, and they've determined in South African case, for instance, to take this and not have the steep curve where you have 2, 4, 16, 18, 32, 64,
128,
and it becomes exponentially to not do that, but to do that.
Okay.
So instead of after 2 days having 1,000 people, you would only have 1,000 people maybe after 2 weeks.
And our hospitals can cope with
The
that.
hospitals
Yeah.
can cope with that.
Yeah.
If we had better medical facilities, the system works better,
Yeah.
then you would probably not have to be as drastic. And that's why some other countries waited slightly longer.
Oh, good point.
So is there a reason why this is 3 weeks in particular? Is it just some number they pulled out of a hat, or?
No, so it would be calculations by the epidemiologists based on the RO number and those initial cases that they see in a particular country.
Okay.
So they would do their complicated calculations.
And you've got a case study of existing countries already in the last 3 months.
So much of this would be based on what has been done in other countries.
Yeah, probably like Southeast Asia, because those guys have been in the center of it for so much longer.
Yeah.
Just with all this in mind, and we were saying how much this has changed. Has anything changed about how we understand the virus now? Like, has there been any new information that's come out that's important for our viewers to know? Or like, is it more of the same? Are we like seeing the ideas that we had before being cemented?
So this virus is still behaving very similar to SARS and to MERS. So the 2003 coronavirus outbreak and the 2012 coronavirus outbreak. I saw a very interesting paper, scientific peer-reviewed paper yesterday, where they were reporting a very small case study. So I think it was 4 patients that they looked at, where babies who were born to infected mothers did not develop severe symptoms. Yeah. So there were some other weird skin rashes and things they had. Yeah. But all of them were, after the normal 3 to 4 days, were discharged from hospital as healthy babies, all 4.
Oh, wow.
So I remember in South Africa, for instance, there was this big concern about would it be safe for pregnant mothers?
Yeah.
This is not conclusive because it's a very small study, but it gives us some hope.
Okay.
So I think that for me was one of the very interesting things we've seen over the past few days. We are still seeing that it can infect SARS-2, remember it's called, SARS coronavirus 2, and it causes COVID-19. So we still see that everybody is susceptible, so can be infected. We're still seeing that those most at risk are older males with comorbidities. So we're still seing that.
So that would be with some other predisposed...
So it was with other diseases, yes. So in Italy, for instance, 75% of those who became severely ill and died, 75% had at least 2 other diseases before they became infected.
And were they also elderly male?
They were, 85% of them were older than 65, and they were mostly male.
Wow.
So, Ta, I know you had some interesting questions with Italy.
With Italy, my question has been looking at the numbers around their deaths. Now, we know that they've got the most deaths now in the world, but why have they got so many more deaths than a country like Germany?
So I actually wrote an article that was published in Popular Press, and I mentioned this actually. If you look at the numbers, so 20% of, in Italy, when they were tested, 20% of 600 GPs in Italy was tested, came back positive.
Sure.
Medical personnel, 8.5% of all medical personnel in Italy tested were positive.
That's scary.
Where do you go when you're ill? To your GP,
and when people
to hospital.
Yeah.
Yes.
These people were not taking the precautions because they were not prepared.
Yes.
So I would not be surprised when after this pandemic we do studies and we trace many of these outbreaks back to the medical personnel.
Okay.
So that is one factor. The other factor is Italy has the second highest average age in the population.
Okay.
In fact, the average age above 65 in Italy, last figures I saw, 23% of the population.
That's a large
South Africa's on 8.5, I think.
Okay.
Huge difference.
Probably why we're not seeing
Significantly lower. So what happened? So apparently, when somebody became ill in old age homes, they were not isolated. Who was most at risk of developing severe symptoms?
Okay.
They aged.
Yeah.
So I've heard horror stories, and they haven't been verified. I don't know whether they're true. Where they've now discovered and reported in Italy that many of these patients have just been left to their own to take care of themselves. I don't know whether that's true.
Okay.
What is true is that I think when the outbreak first happened, they were not cautious enough to take care and isolate those infected older people. So it is like going into a dry wheat field and just lighting one of the stalks.
Yes.
And I think that's what happened. So very high population of the aged.
Okay.
Not isolating them, so no precautions. And then even worse, your medical personnel that needs to take care of them is infected.
So even if Italy acted early, or you can blame them for acting late, people went to where there was high infection.
That's my hypothesis if I look at the facts.
Okay.
Take, for instance, a country such as Germany.
Yeah.
Germany just across the border, essentially.
Yeah.
You don't see the same type of numbers. Same healthcare system, same way of doing things. Population looks very similar.
Even aged population.
Yep, very, very similar. However, if you look at where the most SARS-1, 2003, research came from,
Yeah.
Germany. So the world's leading researcher in SARS 2003 outbreak is from Germany.
Oh, so that's why Germany is pushing so hard for vaccines.
So exactly. So
Is that why they're also doing better?
So they were set up, and this leading researcher is an advisor to the WHO and to his government.
Oh, wow.
So I suspect that they were better prepared because they had the information and they could prepare better.
Sure.
So just bringing that now back home, do you think we could see what's happening in places like Italy? I know Spain's another hotspot now. Would we be seeing that here, or because our population is so different that it might turn out better? And also with the lockdown,
I don't think we're going to see the same as Italy. I don't think we're going to see the same as Spain and Germany and China. If you look at I remember this is speculation based on the facts and what I did in 2003. If you look at our demographic distribution, our pyramid looks totally different.
Yeah. Our population curve is very triangular. Yeah.
Exactly. So it looks that's Italy.
so
Yes.
with the
I get
with
you.
the oldest being on top, with the oldest population being on top, and the
Italy?
youngest at the bottom.
Yeah.
Us, we inverted.
Yeah.
And remember, so yes, if you're infected, if you're young, even if you don't develop severe symptoms, you can still be infective. So you can still spread the disease. But those most infective, who can spread it the most, are those who are really, really ill because their viral loads are higher.
So the iller you are, the more infectious you become.
And that's why medical personnel are such high risk.
Because they're in that environment.
Because you only go to hospital if you're really, really, really ill.
Oh, yeah.
So the viral load in those patients are higher. So your risk
I didn't know that.
So your risk of being infective and spreading it is much, much bigger. You get something called a super spreader.
Yes.
So in Singapore, 2003, we saw these super spreaders. And the worst super spreader I know of during SARS-1 was somebody who infected 50 people.
Wow.
And I think I saw something similar reported. I haven't verified it from the peer-reviewed research yet, but I saw something similar now where one person infected 50 others.
Wow.
So that person was a super spreader, might not have had very severe symptoms, but he was a super spreader. So his viral load was very high.
Oh, okay.
So just because it's not bad for you doesn't mean.
Exactly.
So that's why we all need to do our part.
The lockdown is so important.
Exactly.
Okay,
Remember
makes
bats.
sense, yeah.
Remember we discussed the bats last
Yes.
time? So because bats, even though they can be carriers and spreaders, they don't have symptoms. So they're asymptomatic.
Yeah.
So you could have this for humans as well. And that's why I still wash my hands and I still sanitize. And if I don't feel well, I isolate myself and don't mix with, especially those vulnerable groups.
Yeah.
So I know, like, we were speaking about those most vulnerable now in terms of Italy and how we have significantly fewer of those people here. But how do we protect them? How do we look after them? So I know personally a few people, their grandparents live with them, or they have people with very bad asthma. What can we do to make sure that they're protected?
So in those type of cases, I think a shutdown is a good idea, so that you have that family. If the older person cannot be isolated into a room with their own bathroom, and it's always not very practical. So in those type of cases, this might be the most practical, but really look after the aged. If they do go out, have them wear a mask.
Okay.
Take care of yourself because ultimately you're going to be in contact with them. I think that's very, very important.
So personal responsibility plays a big role in South Africa right now.
Okay, and then you did mention masks and things, and I know I've been seeing a lot of people wearing masks in public, wearing gloves. Some people while driving would be wearing both of them, masks and gloves. Up to what point does it help?
So gloves, the WHO, not gloves, masks.
Yeah.
The WHO has officially said that masks are not effective in you catching the virus.
But
If you do have symptoms, it helps because remember, it's transmitted via droplets.
So it protects you from spreading.
So it protects you really from spreading, so it protects others. Yes, I still say wear a mask even if you're not ill. and purely for the fact that it's transmitted. If you get it on your hands,
Yeah.
you touch all over, and you touch your mouth, you touch your nose, you touch your eyes.
So
that protects the nose and the mouth at
Okay.
least. But the
But the gloves then seem redundant.
gloves, so gloves, and I said gloves first because that's a pet hate of mine.
Okay.
Because I'm seeing more and more people wearing gloves all day.
Yeah.
I think that is a really bad idea because the glove is not meant to protect your hands.
Yeah.
The glove is meant to keep your hands essentially aseptic, which means not
Yeah.
contaminated, so that you don't contaminate yourself. So if somebody wears gloves all day, it almost, in my opinion, lulls them into a false sense of security, so they don't sanitize as often as possible.
Okay.
And they are touching their face
And they are.
unconsciously.
Yeah, with those same gloves.
So it would be essentially as though you're not wearing anything.
Yeah.
So it would then be better for you to not wear gloves because then you
Yeah.
will sanitize all
Yeah.
day.
Okay.
So it creates this false sense of security.
Yeah.
That, So when I see that, it really upsets me.
I have a question just on the
Yeah.
whole thing about wearing gloves all day. We spoke last time about the longevity of these viruses on different surfaces.
Yes.
Now, the material that a glove is that such a material that these viruses will live longer?
Or does it matter?
So we don't know, but if you sanitize as well, if you want to wear gloves all day, sanitize. So do exactly what you would have done not wearing gloves.
Okay.
People are not doing that. So it kind of defeats the purpose, I think.
Yeah.
So on that, I just want to clarify something. So it's not that, oh, the virus is in contact with my skin, now I'm going to get it. It's more that your skin acts as a medium of transfer, right?
So it is essentially, it adheres. Remember, it's essentially mucus and spit and droplets.
Okay, but so small you can't
so
see
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's because the virus could the virus could still stay on the surface even after the liquid is no longer there.
Yeah.
So remember, you can't see viruses with your naked eye or even a light microscope.
Yeah.
So it's essentially, if you take a drop of water and you put it on a surface, if you touch the drop of water, it transfers to your finger. If you then touch your face, the drop of water transfers to your face.
Yeah.
That's how you transfer it. So irrespective, I'm always, and once again, it's a pet peeve of mine because it's almost as though people scared that the virus is going to transfer through the skin on their hands. So
Yeah,
that's why
that's
they're
a
wearing the gloves.
misconception people
It
have.
cannot.
Yeah.
It's a respiratory virus.
So that's
Yes.
good to know.
So it needs to get into your
pores.
body. Exactly.
So
So
rubbing the eyes, nose,
Exactly.
picking the
Don't
nose.
breathe too close to your significant
because
other,
remember,
Karen.
all of these
No
things.
kissing.
Yeah. So remember, all of these things are connected.
Yes.
So it can from all of these, it can get into your airways.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's good to know. So gloves isn't a catch-all. Still sanitize.
So you need to tell your viewers that gloves are
Please,
not there
guys.
to protect your hands.
Yeah.
This virus cannot get through the skin, so you're not protecting your hands.
And unless you have a cut, of course, like then.
No, remember it is respiratory, so it has to get into
even
the
then.
airway.
Okay.
It needs to get into
Were
the
you
airway.
listening 1 minute
No, I
ago?
was. It's just yeah, blood. Okay.
No, it cannot.
Okay, it cannot.
And that's why the blood banks have asked people to donate blood because it's safe.
Okay. So still donate blood because we need blood.
Unless you have symptoms, obviously, with any disease that you have, you can't donate blood.
Yeah.
Okay. Wouldn't they test you so you get a free test if you go?
No, they do not.
Oh, okay, they don't. Okay.
Because it's respiratory.
Okay, it is respiratory. Now going on to that, we've looked at how we can protect those most at risk. We've learned about masks and gloves and what they can and can't do. We're seeing in some countries, especially those that were hit much earlier, like especially your Southeast Asian countries, specifically South Korea, they had a very large testing campaign. They tested at one stage, what I read, a third of their population. But now that they're seeing that the new reported cases are slowly decreasing.
Their curve is flattening.
The curve is flattening. What are they doing right, if you can comment on that? And then also, would we be hoping to see that here as well with what we're doing?
Can I add something onto that question? Or is it just the 3-month cycle of the virus ending?
So it is the infection going through its paces.
Okay.
But also remember that, and I've said this from day one, and I said it in a radio interview as well, and I looked at the DJ and I said, I will not be very popular for saying this. Many infections sometimes have to be left just to go its way.
Okay.
So just allow it to go.
Wildfire. Yeah.
So this virus is calculated that about 60% of South African population needs to be infected for us to have herd immunity,
Okay.
where we become naturally resistant to this virus
As a population.
So that
Very anti-popular approach.
exactly,
Yeah.
and that would not. So I'm not an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would then minimize transfer quite drastically.
Okay.
That unfortunately places many people at risk, and that's why it's not something that you really, especially in this case, maybe
Yeah.
should be advocating.
Yeah.
But with an RO number of about 2 to 3, that's what you need to see.
Okay.
And the other big concern, if you look at remember I said there were 7 human coronaviruses that we know about. 4 are called community-acquired coronaviruses. So they circulate throughout the human population every year continuously.
Yeah.
They cause between 10 and 30% of all colds in the world. Those can reinfect.
Yeah.
So we are not sure yet whether this virus can reinfect or not, which means if somebody is infected and they become healthy, are we protected or not?
Okay.
The other 2, MERS, very slow transfer, mostly from animals to people. SARS disappeared. So we could not see in those 2 infections
Okay.
whether this is what would happen. So if this one persists, at least we will get that type of data.
Okay.
Are you resistant or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just going back to what you said, 60% of South Africa get infected. We all build the resistance to it. We have a country full of, with high cases of HIV and TB. Isn't that a huge risk?
So,
I know you're not advocating it. But I'm just saying the consequences of that.
so an article of mine was published in the Cape Times yesterday, where I've actually gone to the literature and I've looked at cases in SARS-1 and MERS, and there's been no case ever where somebody with HIV, that's HIV positive, develops severe symptoms.
Oh.
In fact, a very interesting case from China where 50 SARS patients and there were HIV patients sharing a ward. None of the HIV patients even became ill. However, the medical personnel taking care of them, a large portion of them became ill.
Wow.
So
So the
a link
the-
between ARVs.
I was going to ask
So that's exactly the point. So the theory from the literature that I've looked at, and that's why I wrote the article for the Cape Times, was the hypothesis, the theory is that those on antiretrovirals are somehow protected.
Okay, so that's good news then for our populations that
I think
are suffering
so.
from these things.
I think so. If this virus,
So it's hopeful.
if this virus behaves exactly the same as the other 2 lethal ones, then yes, it is.
Yeah.
So what about somebody that is not on antiretrovirals? Somebody with a low immune system. Somebody who's just had cancer. Remember their immune system is lower?
Yeah, and the
Some-
chemotherapy as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some people have autoimmune diseases. Immune
Yes.
system is lower. So that is in that article as well that I wrote. So it appears as though everybody during SARS and MERS, and even we've seen some cases now, people with compromised immune system, so the immune system is lower, they're not at risk as well of developing severe symptoms, so they can become infected, but we haven't seen cases yet where people have become deadly ill. Why? COVID-19 and the other 2 as well, SARS and MERS, when they infect,
Yeah.
they stimulate what is called a hyperimmune response. So the immune system overreacts.
Yes.
So it produces cytokines, which controls the immune system, and it's called a cytokine storm. So you have a whole lot of cytokines.
Yeah.
Too much cytokines in your body can damage the lungs.
And this is the SARS. It's-
SARS and MERS, and we're seeing it for this one.
Yeah.
What is one of the comorbidities that predisposes you to severe disease? Lung disease.
issues. Smokers.
Oh.
Exactly. So if your lungs are compromised, then you have a high risk of developing severe disease.
Sure.
So my theory is if somebody has a lower immune system, a weaker immune system, even if you have a cytokine storm, it does not take you past that baseline where it should be. So you never have too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from the literature, so I've done this article, I've written based on literature searches and information, and that's my theory. The cytokine storm can cause lung damage due to various processes in healthy individuals with normal immune systems, but those with not. It never reaches the stage where it damages the lungs. So you can become infected, can have symptoms, but it's never severe, or very seldomly severe.
Sure.
So this is
That
almost
is
a bit
interesting.
of good news in
Yeah.
a way.
If this virus behaves the same as the
We
other
don't
2,
know. Yeah.
we're learning something new about this virus every day. So if this virus is consistent with the other two lethal coronaviruses, then yes, I think we will see the same, but only time would be able would tell, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay.
You did say in the last episode that this isn't a disease to kill a quarter of the
Yeah, no,
world.
that's
No.
still coming.
You said that's coming.
And that's another disease. And remember, and when I speak to people, the biggest fear almost is I'm going to be infected today and I'm going to be dead in 2 days' time. No.
20,
Not for this one,
It's a
at least.
17-day.
So it has any time between 2 days and about 14, 15 days incubation period.
Yeah.
And then you could also, at the end of that, start developing severe disease. And the average that last average that I saw for people became severely ill to death was about 14 days.
Okay.
So remember, we discussed last time as well. So you'll know when you have difficulty breathing.
Yeah.
And if the system, the medical system, is capable and able, and we don't have an overrun of it, they could put you on a ventilator as well.
Okay.
I wouldn't want that, obviously, but the point is that unlike the movies, you're not infected today and you kill over 2 days
It's not,
later.
what's it? Zombie.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Like, the
Yeah.
movies have zombies. Like,
Yeah.
that's not happening.
So that's the sense when people ask me questions, and I've been asked probably thousands of questions this past 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I get the sense that that's the biggest fear from everybody.
Yeah.
I'm going to become infected and it's going to be a death sentence. No.
Yeah.
About 80% of people have mild symptoms.
Yeah.
Then the remainder, more severe symptoms. Only 6% of that 20
Yeah.
ends up in ICU.
Yep.
Okay.
And then only about 4%, it's now 4, it's not 3 anymore, appears to be dying. But the majority of that 4%.
4% of
In total.
cases, not open cases.
Yeah, total
Okay,
cases.
that's an important
Yeah.
stat. to know.
But even more so, so what we're reporting as a mortality rate, death rate, it's not a death rate. It's a case death rate.
Yeah, we don't know what comorbidities
They had.
they would have as well.
No, not just that.
Okay.
So we are testing, 300, 400,000 people?
Yeah.
So if we say that 300, and what was the figure, 320?
372,000.
So 372,000 people are positive.
Yeah.
13,000 of this 370,000 died.
Yes.
So we're saying this is a mortality rate for this. It's a case mortality rate.
Okay.
How many people were never tested because the symptoms were so mild
Yes.
that they were never tested? So my theory
valid
is,
point.
if you look at the other coronaviruses, those circulating,
We've
How
all
ma-
caught them.
how many of those over here
Wow.
were never tested? So if we have, and that's why we will only know a mortality rate for this virus at the end of this outbreak. Then scientists would go, like what they're doing in South Korea at the moment. They would go and they would test as large a population as possible if the government can afford it. You would then look at patients who were seroconverted, which means they have their antibodies now. So they were at one point in the past exposed to this virus, but they recovered. Once you have the seroconversion rate, you can then say, 9 million people were infected.
Yeah.
13,000 of the 9 million died.
Now
That's
that's
my
so much.
That's my mortality rate.
Okay. So there is still a level of catastrophizing that's happening in the world around
Of course,
Corona.
of course, we're saying
Infodemic, as you coined the phrase.
So the media, exactly. So the media should be saying 4% of our 320,000 people are dying.
Okay.
Not 13,000 of people who have caught COVID.
Yeah.
We don't know how many people were
caught.
infected, have caught COVID.
It might be over 1 million in the world.
Yeah.
2 million for that
But
matter.
we know how many people tested positive. There's a difference between
Yes.
those two.
Not everyone's being tested.
Yeah. So it's only in hindsight that we would know these.
Exactly.
So we're pretty much nearing the amount of time that we have for today. The last question I just want to close on, it's been brought to my attention, and we've been seeing, at least amongst South Africa, like amongst the panic buying and stuff, people giving their dogs to shelters or their animals to shelters, fearing the coronavirus and fearing transmission. Can dogs catch it?
So as far as I know, 1 or 2 dogs have tested positive. However, that needs to be validated. You get false positives. So when you do a test and the dog could have coronavirus on his skin or sample could have been contaminated in the lab. So it needs to be verified. These viruses typically are very host specific. So if they come from bat, they jump to humans. Typically, they could only infect humans. They maybe could be movement back,
Okay.
but it's very, very unusual. Dogs have their own coronaviruses. It doesn't jump to us.
Yeah.
So if you look at how coronaviruses get into the body, remember we spoke about the spikes the corona, the Latin for the crown. That crown is caused by proteins sticking out of the virus.
Yeah.
Those proteins sticking out is what attaches to proteins on your cell. So all of our cells have proteins sticking out, and it's used for cells to speak to each other, to get nutrients into the cell,
Yeah.
etc. Viruses have adapted to recognize certain of those proteins, attach to it, and then go in.
Sure.
These proteins that we have on our surfaces are very different from others, from other animals' proteins. So this protein here can only recognize this protein.
Okay.
So if it's this round and it can only fit like that, it can only fit like that.
Yeah.
This can't fit like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And until that is a perfect fit, it can't go in. So with SARS-1, the difference between the civet cat and the human coronavirus was in the entire genome, in the entire genetic material, there was a 29 base pair. So ATCG is what makes up DNA.
Yeah.
29 of those bases
Yeah.
were removed. SARS has 28,000 base pairs, the genome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
29 bases changed, was removed.
For that jump.
Between the bat and the humans.
Yeah.
From bat, 29 of those out of that 28,000 were removed. That was enough to recognize the human, and it jumped.
Oh, so it can jump, and these things can move among species. But is this grounds to take your dogs to shelters?
No.
No.
So you need to. It happens over a very long time. It's mutations but very, very unusual. That's why we see one of these coronaviruses infecting. Not all at once, but it takes time for these type of things to happen.
Yeah.
So people don't give your dogs away.
Yeah. keep
Love them, just keep them safe as well, just as you would a person.
In all peer-reviewed studies that I've seen to date, we have not had one dog or cat or goldfish or turtle or tortoise
Ease into the tank.
or a cockatiel or budgie infected. No.
Okay. Well, Professor Fielding, Dad, thank you so much for coming in. If people would like to get more information or read some more of your work, is there a place that's centralized they can find everything? Or
That we can attach to this video.
I think uwc.ac.za. So the information and the articles that I've spoke of would be on that website. But then also remember for good information, trustworthy information, WHO, World Health Organization, NICD, National Institute for Communicable Diseases,
and that's South African.
South African one, and then the Center for Disease Control, the USA CDC.
Okay.
Please, I know you guys have lots of influence over thousands of youth.
Yes.
Please make sure that you take the message out there that there's lots of false information and fake news on social media. If you get something, before you panic, go to one of those 4 sites that we've just mentioned, verify the information on there.
Yeah.
Those sites would wait for researchers to publish, and other researchers would have verified whether it's correct or not. So don't panic until you've verified, please.
And don't panic buy.
And don't panic.
Don't
buy.
panic.
Please.
Leave the toilet paper, please.
I don't get the toilet paper thing as well.
Well, we know it can't go through the skin. I mean,
Yeah,
it only
yeah.
goes through.
Yeah, so like, why
Please.
wipe?
Well, unfortunately, SARS has been shown to be shed from fishes, and so has this virus.
So maybe the toilet paper.
I don't know what the toilet paper still has to
Okay.
do, but so there is that risk of being spread that way.
Thank you for coming once again.
Yeah,
and
really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, guys, for watching. As always, we'll stick the links to useful articles to those websites we discussed down below. And please share this, spread awareness, stay safe,
Yeah.
and thanks for watching. Bye.